weeks and months, and well, of course, his name is the name of this symposium, where, Felix, I'm very, very thankful that you invited me to come here and to give a talk, and it's pretty emotional. I wasn't here for 4 years, and when I moved to the Netherlands 8 years ago, it's just only the second time to come back, and I see old friends and old colleagues, and I very much like what I see. So thank you very much, Felix, and your team. This talk actually is pretty simple, I would say. I was blown away by these sophisticated tissue engineering talks, which we heard the session before, and by the harmony. The harmony is at a level with clinical implantations where the Alterra stent so far is not. So therefore, the amount of information I would like to share with you is much more simple and less sophisticated. However, let me take you through this Alterra story, and let me show you where it started and where we are at the moment. So the Alterra, this name is given by Edwards, is an adaptive pre-stent which is and should be used for pulmonary valve implantation patients. My disclosures as shown on this slide. Well, large RVOT, Lee, you already showed a lot of this. The main question is, are there so many RVOT patients? What are the sizes of these patients? And what is better, taking a valve into these huge RVOTs or MPAs, or should you use a carrier as another idea than putting valves into RVOTs which are bigger and bigger and bigger? If we take a look at the RVOT morphology, which is shown in the paper from Shivano, then we know that we have this huge varieties of RVOT morphology. And if we probably take away those which would be primarily suitable for MELD or sapien valves, the smaller valves, then these bigger ones would be still there. And as Lee said, probably 3/4 of the patients nowadays would have to be sent to surgery and would not be suitable for a percutaneous valve because the anatomy of the MPA would be too large and not suitable. So I like to think in pictures, and I like to take pictures, and a very simple comparison for me is, well, if you have a door where 1 or 2 people should go through this door, then the question is, why do you need a door with 4 parts like this? Or in other words, wouldn't this door be enough? If I think about self-cleaning of leaflets, if I think about incomplete opening of leaflets, probably that's a valuable consideration. How big should the valve be, and should we go for bigger and bigger valves in the future? So the number of patients already discussed and shown by Lee, probably something like 75%. Let's see, we will see. And the main consideration, again, coming back to this idea of doors and seeing what is happening with harmony valve, now addressing 30 millimeter, hopefully a little bit more in the future. The main play with 2 ideas is, should we make the valve fit the vessel, or should we probably make the vessel fit the valve? When we look back, then Jonas had this publication, and he came up with this size reduction device, which was some 19-hole mesh. As far as I know, I couldn't find much more than this literature. As far as I know, it's not really it not really went for a clinical application, but probably somebody could correct me if I'm wrong. However, if I take his paper, then he even goes higher with his number where he estimates the need, and he probably said that there are some 85% of patients which could be suitable for larger RVOT MPA devices. So this population, beside MELD and actual sapien sizes, is a huge population, and of course we should do something with these patients. As everybody knows, the sapien XT and the sapien 3 go up to 29 millimeters. That's the valve we use in all procedures as you do when we have suitable MPAs. Just to show you the way we do it, of course, is 3D, but I will not give any other 3D image in this talk. So what we do is we take a bulk 30 balloon, because you can size it and it blown up to 3-4 atmospheres. Of course, it's very rigid, but it would imitate a stiff 30 millimeter diameter device. So if we find this thing fitting and stable, then we would go for an implantation. But in this patient, you will see in the next film, this balloon, and of course it's very stiff. You could just pull and push it through the MPA and RVOT. So what is in the pipeline, I don't have to talk about this. Harmony we heard, and Venus P valve, Jacques will talk about this. So where did this idea and this collaboration with Edwards and their ideas start? In 2013, we all knew there were difficulties with the production availability of MELODY valves. And for me, coming from Berlin, and therefore being very close to all ideas around Bonhoeffer's valve, I was a MELODY guy. But by 2013, this changed a little bit necessarily, and I had to open my mind because we need another product. And this is when we opened up for the Sapien products. I went to Edwards, to Irvine in 2014. I was really deeply impressed by the amount of engineering and by the amount of knowledge, 100 test settings to check valves, CFD stuff. I had to give a talk on the Utrecht experience, what we did, so I thought this is a blah, 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 and I go there and look to the PCH and take a day on the beach and go home. But what was developing was what I liked very much. There were people listening to ideas, and actually they were asking, what is missing? What do you guys in the clinic need? What are things to talk about? What are projects which probably could be promising for the future? Well, we discussed things like make a package where you have a valve and the stent, probably combine things. And whatever we discussed, we came from this the perspective, why should valves be bigger and longer and stiffer? Why not probably putting this problem from a stent and a valve in a division? Why not divide this problem and first think about a carrier which have some size reduction function, and then with this thing in place, as with ordinary pre-stenting, take the Sapien 29, for example, because it's already big enough for everybody, as Nick pointed out, with set values. So we thought, let's think about a carrier and then place the carrier, and when this thing is in place, it will cause symmetry in the middle, and it could take probably some kind of asymmetric shapes at the outside. We thought about trapezoid shapes, rectangular dimensions which should be tackled, the distance to the ostia from the right left long artery, radial forces, 19-0 material was chosen, acceptable sheath sizes, dimension, all in all. So we started with these things, very straight, rectangular, large MPAs where you would just use the stent in a parallel way, and then came to, yes, trapezoids or probably reverse trapezoid shapes. However, especially for considerations of make a product and a pre-phase feasible, make production feasible, make tests feasible, we reduced, and Edward reduced the idea to, in the first instance, a rectangular system. So different prototypes were tested, and I think there were a number of 8 prototypes within the first year, which was a team of people doing this next to their TAVI duties, and they worked on a very, very fast way and really keeping the pace very high. And after these first prototypes, they were ready after a year with one design which was promising, and then the decision was made to start to take it as a uni-size stent and just start with this and go to animal trials. These animal trials were pretty successful. There were some problems, and especially last year, end of last year, one of the problems were linked to the delivery system, and there was a change done. I will show you how the delivery system looks like. This is a summary. I can skip it because it just outlines vessel, valve, valve, vessel ideas. But then just take a small look on the right side. Of course, it's a mixture from an illustration or virtual illustration. So this is the Alterra stent. You get an idea how the design is, and then within the Alterra stent there's a 29 Sapien mounted. And what we did at the animal experience, and I only was taking part of the smaller number of those, a couple of people participated, was implant the Alterra device, and then immediately, in most of the cases, without any kind of 3 months or 1 month healing time or fixation time, whatever, we straightforward went for implantation of the 29 Sapien. So what are the characteristics of the Alterra stent? Well, as I said, now the decision was made to go for a one size, which is a 40 millimeter diameter and 45 lengths. The inner side, or the waist of the stent, is made in a fashion that it is very, very rigid, and would be suitable for the Sapien 29. There are hundreds of sutures comparable to the Sapien valve, with which the PTFE is sutured to the stent, this 19-volt stent. And then let's just go through rigid landing zone to facilitate the Sapien 29. On the right side, you have, as Lee showed, one of these silicon models where you could imitate how the stent probably could adapt to morphology. And again, we did like the idea that this carrier should adapt to morphology, and then afterwards the valve could be put into a very clean central cavity. So of course it's a 19-volt frame to adapt. Then we have curved ends, and of course this design is not very far away from how the Harmony looks or the Venus P valve looks, because of course we all share the same, I think, ideas of geometry in these huge RBUTs or MPAs. So let me go further to the delivery system. So the delivery system, which was there until last year, 2016, was a kind of wheel which you turn, which you spin with your thumb, which would convert this wheel movement, circular movement, to a longitudinal movement, pushing forward the 19-volt stent without this out of the tube, out of the sheath. And there were some problems with this, so they made a cut end of last year, and they constructed this handle where you, with your thumb, would rotate the upper black part, and this would be, again, transferred into an axial or longitudinal movement, kicking the 19-volt stent out of it. It works pretty well, and luckily it looks and feels and works mechanically much more reliable than the last system. And with this setting, with the stent, and with this delivery system, the Alterra will go into the next phase, into the next level. Once again, some pictures. So that's a combination of Sapien 3 and Alterra next to each other. This is how it would look into a glass, put into a glass model, and this is some nice fancy stuff from the tests when they put this in machines, having video cameras, and then really looking at any millisecond of a cycle and checking how leaflets would work in this Alterra surrounding. How does it look if you put something like this in the pig model, in the swine model? I just brought one film for the tracking, and yes, it works. So it's a swine of 30-35 kilogram, and well, due to the pig morphology, it's a pretty huge system for such an animal. However, the trackability to bring it up was pretty easy. That was not a big issue. The performance, the stiffness, as well as the flex, I would say, from the system is not causing any kind of problems. If you take a look at the full deployment, again in the swine, shown at the next film, and I hope it runs. Yes, it does. Then you could see that with the stent in place, you do some backward movement comparable to the Harmony, fix the self-expanding Alterra at the distal part of the MPA, and then draw back the sheath. And then, different than the Harmony, there's no screw mechanism. It's more something like 3 fingers are grabbed and they are just set free, and the valve would be, or the stent would be in position. And as I said, in most of the animal experience, the Sapien 3 was directly implanted after the implantation of the Alterra, and well, this is nothing new to you, but you will see that even going through the stent, which was placed like minutes ago, you already had enough stability, even the swine model, with a lot of curves to put in the Sapien 3 valve. Well, I think I go ahead here. What is the timeline? Well, as you know, there was the first implantation in 2005 in the US with the pulmonic implant. Then 2010, the Sapien, original Sapien, got a CE mark for 23, 26, and 29 for conduits. And then 2016, CE and FDA mark, and the conduit indication was widened up, and you could use it for valve-on-valve procedures. However, now at the end of the timeline, there's the Sapien 3 now in the compression S3 trial US market, and we will go for the early feasibility study with the Alterra, which is the next step, and I would like to line out with one of the last slides. In this early feasibility study, 4 centers will be chosen in the US, and these 4 centers will go for 15 patients, more or less 15 implantations, where a combination from the Alterra and the Sapien 3 will be implanted and performed. What is the primary endpoint? The primary endpoint is device success at an interval of 30 days. Safety. Secondary endpoint is the freedom from any kind of dysfunction, 30 days and 6 months, which dysfunction would be defined as RVOT or pulmonary valve reintervention to be necessary, moderate or more pulmonary valve regurg, and a mean RVOT gradient above 35 millimeter mercury as a mean gradient, which is pretty high, I think. Key inclusion criteria: dysfunctional RVOT, pulmonary valve regurgitation, RVOT, and so on and so on. Nothing which is very, very new. And the follow-up would include 30 days, 6 months, 1 year, and then annually for the first 5 years controls. So I am very interested to see what will happen the next years. So far, these are the 3 products, at least the left one, the Venus and the Harmony, which are on the market. I would emphasize again, I think it's probably a good idea to do a division, to divide the problem from a huge valve in a huge MPA and give the geometric problem to the carrier and then put in the valve. But there's a lot to discuss, and again, this is just before any kind of clinical trial, and I would look forward what will happen. So with this, that's my son, older image. I would like to thank you for your attention, and let's see what the discussion is about.